Welcome to Leaders and Legends, the podcast focused on leadership and clinical trial execution. I'm your host, Patty Lushton, CEO of Diligent Pharma. In each episode, we'll get to know the individuals who are driving change and influencing the direction of our industry. Whether you're a seasoned executive yourself, an emerging leader, or simply passionate about clinical trials like I am, join us as we discuss our industry's most pressing challenges, the future of clinical trials, and hear insights and advice from the leaders who are moving our industry forward. Margaret, thanks so much for being on the Leaders and Legends podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
So, Margaret, when I saw the announcement that you were appointed as CEO of Precision Medicine, I was really happy. I was like, oh, yay, because I remember our short time working together as part of the AQC. And so, I was thrilled. And also, I just think, it's Precision Medicine is a great company. And there's just not a lot of women CEOs in the clinical trial space. So I was really pleased with that. And I kind of want to talk about sort of the career trajectory and how you got there. And I'm guessing it wasn't a straight line or beeline to the C-suite. So could we start at early career? Could you tell us about your first job and how you got into the clinical trial space?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. It was in no way a straight line, some ups and downs and roundabouts. So definitely not a straight line, but a very interesting journey, I would say. Met a lot of great people along the way. My first job was not in this industry. It was actually with the Bank of England, which is the central bank for the UK and like the Federal Reserve. And I was employed, I'm a mathematician, and I was employed in the mathematical techniques group. And it was a very hard to get into, prestigious thing, and that's probably why I joined. And I absolutely loved it. I loved the place from day one. I just knew it wasn't me. The one fun thing that happened there was in the vault of that building, which is called the Old Lady of Threadneedle Street, is where all the gold is stored. So there's 400,000 gold bars in that vault, and I've held one. So that's a very fun fact. And the other fun fact is they've never had a heist till then.
Oh,
But
well,
but I do think
famous last words.
I know.
We'll keep an eye on things.
Anyone needs a
So,
spare 200 billion? That's where it is.
oh,
But I think I got lucky because very early on, I knew what I didn't want to do. And it really made me think in my first year, I mean, I was like 20 years old. It made me think in my first job, what do I actually want to spend my time doing? So I think I was lucky to have that in a way.
yeah.
And I realized that I wanted to do something a bit more meaningful and work in data that was meaningful to me. And at the same time, a close family member was actually diagnosed with cancer. So I also had that oncology, which comes full circle to precision, actually, but I had that in my mind as well. So I very much deliberately targeted the pharmaceutical industry, and I joined Glaxo, which at that point in time was the number one in the world, number one pharmaceutical.
Okay.
And it was definitely, I found my people, I found my thing. So, and actually, I've ever after pretty much stayed in the same industry with CRO or the Glaxo large pharma side. So my career has been, I think I've never wanted to do a beeline to the C-suite. Maybe I should have. For me, it's always been about what do I find interesting? I want to learn new things. I want to see how it works. So I spent a number of years in PPD and actually went to the US with PPD. Slight digression, I went for 2 years. I now have an 18-year-old American and it's 20 years later. So I'm still.
Oh, okay.
But after PPD, I joined Quintiles. And the reason I joined Quintiles actually goes to exactly my earlier point. I wanted to do different things. I didn't want to do biostats and data management for the rest of my life. And Quintiles, I'm eternally grateful to them for the experience. They let me do everything. And I ran
That's great.
ultimately every function: safety, regulatory, data, stats, clinical, project management, you name it. Even a stint in sales and a stint in doing the technology and processes. So over a decade at Quintiles and IQVIA, I'm hugely grateful for that time. My last role in Quintiles, I think because I'd done all those different things along the way, was actually president of clinical development. But what actually happened was my former boss from my PPD days called me. He was running CEO of PRA, and he called me and said, would you like to come and be our COO? And I couldn't turn down that opportunity because it was broader, and I
Yeah.
wanted to do a little bit broader, a little bit more. I'm probably a stepwise thinker in terms of career, and that's what I did. I did that knowing that would be one of two outcomes, in fairness, very upfront. We were either going to sell the company or I would be the successor and take the CEO seat. And as you know, we ultimately sold that company to Icon.
Right.
And at that point, I actually joined a private equity firm. Again, I wanted something new, something different, and great experience there. Linden Capital, Chicago-based PE. They're a phenomenal company, and the expertise there is phenomenal. And that was another great learning for me. Really learning at looking at how you look at companies, and I actually got to learn also more about like companies outside of R&D. More on the commercial side, etc. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really great. Um, Precision medicine group, how did that appear? So what actually happened, it's a kind of funny story because I was working with Linden Capital and we were very interested in investing in a strong CRO. And I've had a few times, we should look at precision. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I think they're really deep in oncology, obviously precision medicine. They sound quite interesting to me. So I met Mark Klein, who is a co-founder of Precision. I met him at JP Morgan and said, we're really interested. Could we invest in you or something along those lines? The way he tells it is, long story short, maybe about 6 months later, something like that, Mark called me up and said, I've got a better idea. Why don't you come and talk to us about the CEO position?
I love it. I love it. Well, just everything you described, you really were, maybe not intentionally, but you were really setting yourself up for a CEO role, just given all just the breadth of experience and the different types of roles that you had. And yeah, I have so many questions. We have emerging leaders that sometimes, every once in a while I hear from some of the people that listen to this podcast. And I think that what strikes me about your story, which I think maybe younger professionals can relate to, is this, your motivation, right? And you were as a young person, what strikes me as a very prestigious, like you landed a job that maybe others might take a decade or so to be able to get to that place. And you landed a great job. But it was really an internal decision to move on based on your instincts, right? And based on what really drives you as a person rather than the sort of external trappings of, being at the, this very prestigious institution. So can you talk about that? Has that been sort of a through line through your career of just trusting your gut, trusting your instincts around career choices?
100%. And I do laugh at it because I'm a mathematician and I have friends from university who became like banking, hedge fund managers, da da da. And I do laugh. Then maybe I took a different path and a longer path, but it's like
Yeah.
it has to interest me and it has to be something I feel passionate about. And the other piece to it, I think, and it does relate to precision actually, is more and more you realize it's who you work with is really important. And it's great when you have the luxury to be able to choose what you do and don't do. And I appreciate when you're younger in your career, you might not have that luxury. But what becomes increasingly important is what you spend your time doing. Is it something you're passionate about and believe in it? Do I think about patients every day of my life? Absolutely not. But it is the overarching,
Yes.
we don't make paper clips. We do something that does some good in the world. And then it's what you do, and then I think who you do it with, the people you work with becomes incredibly important. It's really why I joined Precision. I started meeting. I was not looking for a job. Was not looking
Yeah.
for a CEO role at all.
Right.
And I just started to talk to people. I thought, I like this group, and it's kind of interesting. The other thing I'd call out is sometimes, and particularly as a female, when you're having children, etc., sometimes you have to make decisions for personal reasons, and it'll work out. I think it'll work out because
Mm.
a couple of my decisions along the way were not career decisions. So at one point in my career, so I was living in London with the Bank of England, worked at Glaxo in London. I actually then chose to go back to Scotland. And it was, if you haven't noticed, I've got a Scottish accent, not a North Carolina.
I
Uh,
did notice that.
Not Irish, but that's okay. People think I'm Irish, but that's okay. I have an Irish background, no problem. But I wanted to go back to Scotland purely for personal reasons. So I
Hmm.
literally called someone I knew at PPD and said, because I knew they had a Scottish hub, and said, "Can I come and work for you?" And fortunately, the answer was yes. It was purely a personal decision. There was no career decision involved in it.
Yeah.
And weirdly, it turned out to be, in retrospect, one of the best decisions I ever made. Because I just got
Yeah.
to start doing bigger things and more things. I went to America. Just a whole load of things clicked into place. So sometimes it's okay to make decisions that are just about you and your family and your personal circumstances, I think.
I'm really glad that you said that because it's sort of only when you can look back on decades of being in a in your career that you can almost see how all the dots connect, right? But in the moment, you're just taking it one step at a time, making the best decisions that you can based on what's important to you. And when you said that, it occurred to me that almost every career decision that I've made has had a very large personal component to it. Just different offers that I refused, even though on paper they seem like, wow, this will get me to the next level, but just didn't fit with, just having three kids and not wanting to commute an hour to work every day, things like that. But it does work out. And it's sort of it's sort of the moral of the story of how you know you can have success if you're really very authentic about the way you're making your decisions and thinking about the bigger picture and what motivates you. And I really loved what you said about the relationship side of it. I learned very early on that this is a relationship business. When I in the very first CRO that I worked in with Hayden Besselar and Jeff McMullen. Some people will recognize those names who are listening to the
I remember
podcast.
that.
Yeah, I really learned as a very young person in my career how important relationships are, and it's really for me been one of the most satisfying things in my career. And it sounds like that was a motivator for the precision medicine role, not the fancy title of CEO. It wasn't what
Yeah,
you were going
it
after,
was
but
more who they were, and it's interesting because I have to go through a slight tangent picking up on what you said there,
yeah,
because but it's for young people, and I have a daughter who's just started college, and nieces and nephews, and very passionate about these people getting on the ladder and having a good career themselves, and the whole working from home thing. Um, concerns me.
mm,
I am not a fan of back in the office 7 till 7, and everyone has to be there every day of the week. But I feel like, especially for people who are newer and younger, that a big part of the fun and the learning has been
yes,
developing relationships, and that for me has happened in offices not,
Mm-hmm.
remote. It's much harder. Once you know someone, it's fine remotely. But if you're new or you're starting out, I just think it's something to be very conscious of, that there's a whole learning in just being with people in the same place.
It's such a yeah, it's a very good point, and it's such a different world compared to when we were starting out. And I think for leaders, just being very intentional about creating those opportunities, even if you have a remote workforce, because it's so tied to creating a positive culture too. Just those opportunities of um, you know working together and learning together. I want to talk a little bit about you. You've had this interesting trajectory in the CRO world. Starting at Glaxo, but then moving into some of the largest CROs in the world with different roles. And I wonder if you could provide your perspective, really from two lenses. One, how precision medicine has evolved since its founding over a decade ago, but also how the CRO industry has evolved as well in the last decade.
And it's the CRO. Can I do more than one decade? I think it's
Oh,
fast. I think it's
please do. Please
I think
do. I could relate to more than one decade for sure.
for all the
Yes.
older people, I might go back a few decades. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
I started
that's
with, I,
fine.
I lied. I started when I was 5 in the CRO industry. I think it's fascinating industry. So, and because I was at Quintiles, so the industry, folks might not know, it was founded by Danish, Sir Danish Gillings, with
Yes.
Quintiles, and it was founded in a trailer in North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which they're my daughters at college, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and around statistical consultancy. And I think in the very early days of the CRO world, it was really large pharma outsourcing, and apart from people like Dennett and the high end statistical with the odd niche stuff, it was really they were giving out stuff they didn't want to do. Just work they were not in,
Right.
very basic work that they were not interested in doing. And I think, and to be absolutely direct, I think there was a sense that the employees of CROs were lesser beings than the employees
Mm,
in pharma, and which is fine. But I think that has completely changed over the decades. And what's
100%.
really,
Yeah.
and if you take a step back and you look at it nowadays, I'm not saying design or development, but if you look at operationally how we run trials, that expertise 100% sits in the CROs. How we actually get the sites, the patients, the data, all of that good stuff. That expertise is in the CROs. And I think what's really fascinating is more recent years, certainly on the large part, you see this kind of swing back to FSP, functional
Mhm.
service provider, because I think the pharmas want a little bit more control again. I do have a view on FSP, but we can talk about that in a little bit. But the other interesting thing is a couple of the large pharma are actually starting to rebuild their own capability in-house. And I think that's fascinating. It's a fascinating up and down cycle. Now, that one I think I'm interested in watching it because it's been probably 3 decades since outsourcing has evolved. And hero industry nowadays it's a huge successful industry. It had a couple of tough years. The last 2 years have no question been really tough
Right.
for reasons outside of their control in most cases. It's been really tough, but it it's a very strong industry. Long term, it's a very healthy space, and I think it's stuffed full of phenomenally talented people across all the CRO, and not just one. And those people, like I say, what I love about them is they actually have joined this industry because they want to improve patients' lives. And again, we don't think about that every day. We're not saints, but that's ultimately why they do it, and that's probably why they stay in this industry, why I stay in the industry, and it's why I love the industry. in terms of precision, they've changed enormously. They
Mm.
started off 2012, two co-founders. We're now sort of nearly 4,000 people. Um, I There's a huge amount of expertise, particularly because we tend to focus on the complex. We tend to focus on the oncology, rare disease. We also focus on access and understanding payers, and I've got huge expertise on that commercial side. But it's a company that for me feels a little bit like old school CRO. It feels like
Mm.
the old days of a PPD or the old days of a, and I've had people who've worked with me who've knocked on my door to join us, and we've picked up some phenomenal talent. And what I've told them, and I'm a pretty direct, pretty truthful person, I've said, we're not perfect, but it feels like, you remember what it was like in such and such a company X years ago? That's what
Yeah.
it feels like here. We were all kind of, we got nice size. We're not too big. We're not too small. We've got the global footprint, about 4,000. But we're all pulling in the same direction, and you've got that passion and that people working really hard to get there for the customers. So it does feel like that genuinely, and that's why I love it.
Mm. Yeah. So is that's really you're speaking about culture, and really the importance of culture and how that can define who you attract and how, your performance and how well you do. And yeah, it's interesting to me how the external forces in the industry also impact the culture within, uh, you know, individual organizations through growth and acquisition
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's well,
It is a
I
funny
I
thing. It is a funny thing because I've said this, and I've actually I've even said it to investors and people like that. It's like, is this the real truth about our industry? Is it isn't about who has the best data, who has the best EDC system, who has the best CTM. It actually isn't about that. Yes, you need to have the up to date. Yes,
yes.
the good process, no question. I'm a big believer in that. But fundamentally, where it starts to get where the differentiating comes in is the expertise and the people and them working as a team. And it sounds very basic, but that's actually the huge part.
Yes, and that's the hardest thing actually to get right. And I totally can see that. In my previous company, we did a lot of um, gathering of quantitative and qualitative data on the health of relationships between pharma companies and CROs. And I was always struck by uh, the situation where a CRO just wasn't hitting their timelines. There were issues around report quality, but they were getting these very high scores of, would you work with them again? Oh, absolutely. They're people, the way they handle problems is, we really
Yeah,
appreciate their proactive communication. Nobody's perfect. This is a tough industry. That, just actually seeing it through the lens of data kind of cemented that for me and has helped me as well in terms of the way I run my business. And so it's a very interesting point, especially given the world now where I think companies are trying to differentiate themselves through
yeah.
technology and through AI. And I was just at DFarm, and it was really interesting to sort of see some of the newer companies, the emerging tech companies that are popping up, and some of the things that are truly interesting and very cool. I think it's hard to innovate. It's hard to drive innovation and new tech, and I sort of sit in the audience and I'm like, wow, that's cool. And I'm also
How are we
the
going to do
the
that?
other part of me is just like, oh,
Uh,
it's going to be a tough road, people.
I 1,000% agree with you, and I am so nerdy. I've actually, I think about this a lot, and I've analysed it and why we have such issues with it all the way through. And
Let's talk about that
let's
because
talk
I've
about.
been
I
analyzing it
know.
too. I want to compare notes with you.
So,
So,
so I go back to. Sorry for all the young people. I go back to Glaxo. I'm going to go through all this because and Patty knows this, but I spent probably most of my decade at IQVIA passionately driving risk-based monitoring. that I was going to definitely get that done, and we did. So that was great. But I go back to Glaxo. So I joined Glaxo, and I discovered there was this thing called. Bear in mind, I was a mathematician who sort of pretended to do statistics, right? So I discovered there's this thing called data management. Oh, all right. What's that then? What do they do? Okay. And then I discovered there was this thing called, and it says going back, the young people won't believe this is what we did. Double data entry.
Oh,
Remember
yes,
that?
double data entry. I'm very
Yeah.
familiar with double data entry.
Right. So for the people who are decades younger, one person that does the first data entry that wasn't done at site, it was done in the pharmaceutical, it was done in Glaxo's office, and then a second person entered exactly the same information, and then we compared. And I said, being a sort of logical mathematician, well, why do we do that? And they said, oh, it's quality. You like this with your quality background. Oh, it's quality. This is a true story. Straight up. I was like, oh, okay. So being an analyst, I go away and I analyze it. And I think you do realize that we pretty much never change anything when we do this compare. And if we do change anything, it's almost never an important variable, anything that's meaningful. So why do we do it? And then the answer, I got another answer, and they must have thought I was a right pain by this point. They said, it's GCP. Oh, it's GCP.
Oh,
Now, GCP is good clinical practice, and we all
mhm.
had little good clinical practice booklets on our desk.
Yes.
And by the way, everyone did this, not just Glaxo. Double data entry was the industry standard for decades, to be clear. I looked through the GCP, I literally went through it twice. I was like, but it's not in there. And
Yeah.
not only is it not in there, it's never been in there and never will be in there. And so I say that as part of the story because I think that's part of it. That we're a very traditional industry. We're very conservative as an
Yeah.
industry, and quite rightly in a way because we need to be, and we're highly regulated. But I do think, and as that anecdote tells you, we use regulations to hide, and then it's a barrier to change, right? I think it's got
Yes.
that going on generally, that
Hmm.
conservative, that regulatory environment that we're very mindful correctly. The other piece to it is the way that clinical trials have evolved and the way we run clinical trials over the decades. What we've done and done a good job of is optimizing parts of the process. So and call that functions, parts and processes within functions. So, we're light years ahead now doing data queries automatically, all that
Yes.
stuff. We can do trip reports for clinical automatically. We can compare safety automatically. Da, 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 da. So we have no doubt progressed in the way we've optimized the part and the function.
Right. So we've optimized within the silos, right?
Correct.
But we
And
haven't
in fact,
optimized across
so
the process,
we haven't
right?
optimized the whole and the ecosystem, and that's where
Yeah.
I get these FSPs. So that's why I slightly roll my eyes at that model. But anyway, we haven't optimized it, and then just to compound it, what happens is not only do we optimize the pieces and the functions, it's further driven because people tend to stay in their function and their lane. And what I
Yes.
mean by that is good example would be me. So I was originally a medical statistician 1,000 years ago at Glaxo. And my career path for 99.9% of people would be to stay in statistics. It's a career. And I might have ultimately been global head of statistics for Glaxo, and that would be a great career. But so very few people move into, I want to see what they do in that lab. I'm going to go run the lab, find out what that bit's about. So very few people actually understand how it all works from end to end to actually help build a process. And now we're in the situation where I think that the technology and the data is way ahead of us.
Mm.
We're way behind in our FSPs and functions, and the technology is sitting there. So I agree with you that we will get there, and the technology will make wonderful enhancements to drug development. But I do think that's going to take time and quite a shift in mindset and in the way we do things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm kind of on the edge of my
That we
seat,
got a
Margaret,
line
because
here first.
no, I think, as you know, we at my company, we have a technology that spans across functions. So I'm seeing firsthand how challenging it
Yeah.
is to work with a large pharma or midsize or even small companies across functions. And I think you've really laid it out. We've actually had to meet clients where they are. So if they're not really working seamlessly across the whole life cycle of vendor management, but they need support in qualification or they need support in risk analysis, then we can provide that. But as I think that maybe you and I have something in common in terms of just seeing a problem and wanting to drive to a solution. So, sort of questioning, well, why do we do that? That doesn't necessarily make sense. And sometimes it's just like, oh, well, that's the way we've always
That's
done
what
it.
we do.
And right.
And that's what the
Or
regulators want us to do. And there is an element of
yes.
the regulators have to move. I mean, they took forever on the risk-based monitoring.
Right. Well, do you think that the regulators could actually be a catalyst for change and improvement? Because I think there
I,
is an overinterpretation of regulations, which holds the industry back. And I've sort of been dealing with that for some time, like because
yeah.
early days when we were centralizing qualification, the pushback we got was, "Oh, that's cool. That's going to drive a lot of efficiency, but regulators aren't going to like that." But there was nothing to back that up. So if the regulations actually are mandate, dictate, those are too strong. Those words are too
Guidelines.
strong,
The infamous,
right?
the risk-based monitoring guidelines eventually appear.
Guidelines. If there's sort of a guidance around taking more of a holistic approach, a quality by design type approach, or a risk-based approach, as the R3 guidelines are suggesting, is that going to be the catalyst? Do you believe?
Yes. And I hesitated because so when you look at AI, so we had, so I'm on the ACRO board now,
Yeah.
and on the first board meeting, I think it was back in a few months ago, we had some guest speakers from the FDA, and they were very keen on AI and seeing more uses and being educated as to where could AI help in terms of the drug process and obviously the huge cost because of all this stuff we have to do on the drug process. So you've got those people, and it reminded me of risk-based monitoring because you've got those people who are progressive and and I do think genuinely everyone's well intended, aren't they? So they just
Yes.
want that. But the issue then is a bit like the same on the FDA side, as an example of a regulator, that then it's got to pull all the way through to the guidelines and the auditors. And what used to happen in the risk-based monitors, we in the very early days, we had that it was hints that this is okay. You don't need to go to every site every day and check every data point, essentially. But then it was like, well, how much do we have to check? And what should we do? And how often should we go? And then there was a bit of a disconnect between probably the people issuing guidelines and the auditors on the ground coming to visit the pharma companies and the CROs. And I think that's where you get a fear. You get a
Mm.
fear
Hmm.
in the industry because it's like, we're not going to go first. And well, such and such from the FDA said they're interested in AI, but what does that mean? And what is my auditor going to say? I think we all need to align better, but I
Yeah.
think it doesn't mean we all have to be pushing forward and going to the FDA or showing. And I do think they genuinely want things to be better and faster, but it takes a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just last week at DFarm, I was listening to a panel discussion about AI and tech adoption, and a leader from a sort of mid-sized biotech said, "We're not going to be first. We would wait for the big pharma companies to adopt at scale, and then we'll follow." And what popped in my mind was like, wow, nobody really wants to be first, right? So it's sort of that's a challenge, right? So I think that there's probably some, I mean, I've always been a big fan of collaboration to drive progress because I think we can sort of move forward together as an industry. We could share information, share learnings, and we have to figure it out. There's just no two ways about it. I mean, we need to catch up, and so it is an interesting dynamic. You said something about FSP that I wanted to sort
Oh,
of pull the thread on because you seem like you have an opinion about that, and I want to hear what your thoughts are about this shift. I don't see it across the board, but I know what you're
yeah.
saying, that there's a kind of an interest in the FSP model now. So a renewed interest. So what
I
are your
would say
thoughts?
it's a back to the future, isn't it?
Is
It's
it
like
back to the future?
you know,
Yes.
you know, you're all out of ideas when we're doing the same thing again. Or maybe we've just been around too long.
I know. We've
But
seen all the
yeah, we
cycles,
did
Margaret.
that.
We've seen it. We've
Yeah,
seen the
we did
pendulum
that.
swing back and forth
We
and
did
back
that
and
same thing,
forth.
yeah, but okay, we'll go with it again. That's fine. No, it's just it goes back to my and you're right. It's not FSP doesn't work for everyone. It works well for large pharmas, maybe some mid-size in certain places, but it's not a one size fits all for sure model. But it has become popular, and I do think it's that control thing within the pharma and the folks in there. And also maybe they think they can do it faster under their own control, the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The, the,
Mm-hmm.
the reason I react to it is much more of a theoretical than I have a problem with people using FSP. It actually goes back to my passionate belief is we need to look at the end-to-end ecosystem of what we're doing, and more so than ever now that we have all this, we can bring data together so easily nowadays, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
I actually it's another, but when I started, and I've said this, but when I started Glaxo as a statistician, the case record forms, as they were called, which were manual books, were stored in the cupboard by my desk. And literally, I'd be on my computer looking at something and think, I need to look at this patient. And I would literally just pull the patient out and
I
read
did the same.
the
That
ERS.
early days, right?
So we lost that as we optimize
Yeah,
all these things. We lost
right.
that holistic view of looking at that patient. And actually now with the technology has meant we can look holistic. We bring data together. We can bring all the sources together fairly easily, really, or maybe a little bit of. But it's much easier. We never used to be able to do that. That was partly these stylos as well. But now we can bring all that data together and look at it and understand the ecosystem. And I think the reason I react to FSP is not that I'm having a go at someone doing an FSP model. It's just that it continues to strengthen and push this
The
silo
silos.
thinking instead of throw that out the window. If you had a blank sheet of paper and you didn't have all these systems and departments, and you have technology A, B, and C, and you have AI company, da, 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 and AI is not quite where people see it is, just
Right. Yeah.
but maybe maybe in 2, 3 years, you have such and such AI can do it. What would you build? And you would have a completely different model. You wouldn't have a data programmer, a stats programmer, a statistician to do the analysis, a data manager to do the cleaning, a clinical trial associate to run back and forth. You wouldn't actually have that at all. You'd have a
Yeah.
completely different model.
Yeah.
And that's my reaction to it.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I think it's an important conversation because I believe that in order to drive to new solutions, you actually have to get very clear on where the problems and challenges are. And
And stop
um,
what you know kind of thing.
yes,
You have
yeah,
to put aside
beginner's
what
mind,
you
right? Just, think about things from a fresh perspective. And I see that that's how your brain works. I'm kind of, now that we're talking, I'm equating it to your being a mathematician, like, because I
Is
think
that what's
of
wrong with me? Is that
study.
what's wrong? You finally cured me, Fatty.
Well, I didn't study math, but I feel like there's a ability to connect dots in interesting ways, to sort of see across a system, think creatively about solutions,
Yeah,
and kind of take an innovative approach to problem solving, right? So that to me, your sort of background, early background,
great.
it's just basically how your brain works. You know, there's some neural pathways that have been established there that I think are probably serving you well now. And yeah, I bring it up too because for people who are trying to figure out, like, okay, with the way the world's going, the way the clinical trials industry is going, first of all, what disciplines are most important now to so that we can be poised for success in the future? And for young people who are thinking about, you know, either going back to school or figuring out what do I spend my time studying that would be fulfilling, but also have a practical application. Data science and
Sometimes I actually,
yes,
there was a TV thing. I have two bias and say mathematician. We're taught to think. Oddly enough, that's what our school teacher told us, that we were taught to think. It's not about doing proof. It's actually learning how to think. But I did read that the most dangerous people in the world will be mathematicians, because
interesting.
or a variation of that, because
Yeah,
basically everything's computerized, AI, and
right.
the people that are equipped to crack code are the most dangerous people in the world.
I love it. I love it. Well, Margaret, I this time has flown by. You know, we're gonna have to talk again. We're gonna have to have part two of
We
this.
have
But
to have a part two, and I'm trying to think of that. Could I actually? You mentioned earlier your platform that goes end to end on Rift or whatever, and it's so typical. But I thought, and I have so much work to do right now. But my first thought when you said that was, "Oh, show me."
yes, well, I'd love to show it to you because I think you would get it. I think it would land for you. And I just have two more questions to close our time together. I'd love to hear just I think you're coming up on a year in your role. Is that right? Do I get the timing right?
Yeah, you're right. It's flown by. I can't believe
Yeah,
it.
I remember it was last
Right,
fall.
30th of September, I'm a year old at Precision
Oh my gosh. Wow. So I just wonder, as you sort of look ahead, what are your aspirations? You know, you've sort of now gotten your sea
Medicine.
legs in your role at Precision Medicine. What are your aspirations for the future there?
What I say is, so I called precision medicine group the industry's best kept secret, because especially worse than that, even when I took the job and I had coffee with a friend who actually had been in the CRO for nearly 30 years, and I said, oh, I'm taking the job, I'm going to be CEO of PMG, Precision Medicine Group. And he said, who's that? I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay.
wow.
So
Wow.
I have been working very hard, and so have my team, at getting out there, getting people knowing us. I think we've done a phenomenal job with that over the last year or so. Definitely done a lot there, and we can see it in the numbers, thankfully. But my goal is, I said this to the team, I'd like us to go from industry's best kept secret, and we're on that journey, to being the go-to for where we play. So if you're like a biotech and you've got an oncology area, it's not we're not someone you've never heard of. We're someone that I'm going to call them, because they know how to do this, and they know how to design assays. They know how to get the right pathway through the FDA, et cetera, et cetera. I want us to be the one they call, not the
Yeah.
one they've never heard of.
Well, that's fundamental. That's so important.
And stay with.
And yeah, and you mentioned Mark Klein, and it kind of brought me back because I'm sure he doesn't remember me, but I do remember speaking to him probably ten years ago or so. And you mentioned it being a relationship business, and I do just remember kind of thinking about how he struck me as a very innovative, interesting, successful person, but not one of these people who kind of was sort of full of himself or, putting that out. He
Uh,
just seemed like a great person to
yeah.
work with. And so, um,
We have to do a shout out for Mark Klein and Ethan
yeah.
later. I work more with Mark.
Yeah, I've not met Ethan, but I've met so many people in my long career, and I've probably only had one or two conversations with him, but he has, and I know a lot of people who know him, but he really has
But
sort of stuck
I
out
can
for
say
me as somebody
that.
who's very somebody to admire. And do you still work closely with him,
Yeah,
even though you've?
he's the exec chair. He and I get on, and I was a bit worried about it because founders can be interesting. But
As one, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
it's been really great. He really focuses more on the M&A side with me. So in terms of
Hmm.
running the business, he's really stepped back. In fact, he's going to completely step back probably towards the end of this year anyway. But mostly he and I work on the M&A together. We travel. He introduced me to a lot of. He's fascinating though. He invests in the film industry. I went to see him. He's got a film. I'll do a shout out. A film called A Little Prayer, which was written
Oh,
by his and directed by his childhood friend from Winston-Salem. And
oh, interesting.
I saw it in a Chapel Hill movie theater a week or so ago. And he and Ethan are actually the executive producers of that
That's
movie.
great.
And I
Yeah.
do call him, and I go, I might insult the whole of America at this point, so I'll try not to. And I do have an American daughter, friendly reminder, so there's no insult intended. But I was asked about how I got on with the founders by Blackstone. We're owned by Blackstone Private Equity, and I said, I love working with Mark. I get on really well with him. I said, in fact, I think he's like a British person trapped in an American body, and he's got a great sense of humor. And then they said, "Are you just saying that Americans don't have a sense of humor?" And I said, "I think I might have. I didn't mean to."
That's great. I love it. So my last question, I just in our little, 2-minute chit chat before we started, I heard that you're now an empty nester, and so I'm wondering now that your child is off, in college, what do you do in your spare time, Margaret? Like, what do you do for fun, and how do you sort
that
of blow
was
off steam after work?
that was patient medicine is pretty full on. No, there's a lot of time I spent out with work. That's why it goes back to you have to do what you enjoy with people you like because you spend an awful lot of
It's
time
a lot of
working.
time for sure. Yep.
And actually, I have to say on the opposite, which is I'm so glad I work, having had my child just leave. If I didn't have that to focus, I would literally drive everyone around me insane. If I didn't have, I've got stuff to do and get on with.
Yeah.
I've got business travel, etc. etc. But I have two dogs, so they keep me busy as well. And I do pretty much daily as we get older. I do a lot of keep fit as well.
Oh, that's great. And that's important. Well, Margaret, thank you so much. I feel like I've gotten to know you better through this conversation, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today.
No, I wasn't sure, but you said it was going to be fun, and it was. It was great fun.
Okay.
I really appreciate you asking me to do this, and I hope I'll come and see you in person at some point.
Yeah, let's see each other soon.
Okay,
Thanks so
take
much.
care. Bye now.